and that's really important, because a lot of times there's kind of a saying amongst other writers is that the art is when you're putting your work into it, and then it turns into a widget. And in terms of the commerce part, is that there's a reason why they put a price in your book. Now, when we talk about art, one of the things, and I take this personally, my son is for disclosure, is an art student. And so one of the things that typically happens for a lot of young African American kids is that if they show a propensity toward art, as in their middle school or in high school, a lot of times they'll get pressure from outside saying, don't do art, don't study art, you need to get quote unquote a return on investment degree. Because we love STEM, but we tend to not call it STEAM in terms of adding art to STEM. So how did you kind of fight that, or what would you say to the young folks in here who may be budding artists and are going to look at this and are going to say, I want to practice by taking various pictures and I'm trying to redo them in their own way? What would you say to encourage them to practice their art?
Well, I mean, I think that's it. Practice your art.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you want to be good at something, you have to do it a lot. There's no way around it. If you want to be a writer, you have to read. If you want to be an artist, you have to observe. You have to practice.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that 10,000 hours is no joke.
Yeah.
I mean, at least 10,000 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I got started early. I was 3 years old.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah.
So, but you know, if you're not going to practice, you're not going to have any progress.
Right.
You know, I mean, I personally, I mean, I'd heard my whole life about starving artists. You know, that whole cliche.
Right.
And you know, I'm allergic to starving, so I figured I didn't like that scenario. So I mean, actually, you know, people were saying you're not going to be famous or be able to support yourself, or you won't be, you know, have any money until you're dead. You know, that whole thing.
Oh wow, yeah.
So I mean, I loved art, but I figured I would study architecture my first semester in college. I got an architecture scholarship. But one semester in, I realized I don't love this, you know.
Yeah.
And I realized I just made a decision, you know. Even if I have to starve, I'm going to do it. I'm going to starve doing what I love doing.
Right.
Fortunately, I didn't have to starve. I got started. You know, I became a working artist right out of college. Mm-hmm. But that is just because I loved it so much, you know, and when I was in school, I was there with a purpose. I was there to learn. I wasn't there to party.
Right.
And I paid for my tuition.
Yeah.
I paid my whole way, so I didn't want to waste my money or my time. So I made sure that I did all of my lessons. I turned everything in when it was supposed to, and there was a growth. There was a progression. So by the time I finished college, I was ready.
Right.
I mean, that's the idea. You want to be ready by the time you finish. So, there were a number of, you know, really great coincidences that made it so that I could become working very early. But it was all because I prepared myself for success.
And that, I think, for the young people in the audience, is kind of a lot of times you'll have the old people tell you about wanting to go to college. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that you'll always learn is that if you look at these two successful brothers right here, they're going to talk about the fact that you can have all the talents you want in the world, but if you're not really going to have a stick-to-itiveness, this idea that I'm going to do as best as I can within the opportunities that I have, then you're not going to help yourself towards success. And success is basically looking and taking control of the fact that you want to be something. And I think that in terms of how this book, going back to Jesse Jackson, a famous quote in terms of, you know, I am somebody, is the essential part of what The Undefeated is about. I want to get some questions from our beautiful audience right here. I knew we black folks. We know we got questions right over here. Right.
It's so interesting. I was just thinking, did you go to art school? What did you
I did. I went to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn.
Pratt Institute.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Feel free. There we go.
What is your suggestion for promoting your book on social media? What's the best way to promote it?
You know, I don't have a question. I just post. I just make posts. You know, and try to do it regularly. If we're doing appearances, you know, progress. videos showing, the progression of a painting or a drawing. Those draw a lot of interest.
Yeah.
But I can't say that I'm a social media guru. I just make the posts. What do you suggest?
Yeah, I
Kwame?
find that a soft sell really works well, and not necessarily saying, "Hey, go buy my book," But I had dinner with Nikki Giovanni last night. We had a great time. She was checking out my new book. I mean, I feel like just different sort of creative ways. I think people connect with you. They want to buy your book when they like you, when they feel some connection with you. So share your story. I think that's what I tend to do.
Other questions? What about some of the show? Oh, right here. No, we're good.
This question is for you, Kadir. I know you've done a lot of postal stamps, and the Richard Wright stamp is my favorite because he's my favorite author, and it's a beautiful piece. So just
Thank you.
I'm curious, you're welcome. What do you have a favorite postal stamp that you've created? Or maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the ones that you have created that people may not know that you're the artist of.
I'm not sure. I'll just say that my favorite, that was my first stamp, was the Richard Wright one. And I really like that one, but I like the Marvin Gaye one as well. I mean, that was, I'm familiar with the family. I was asked to do it, and I love Marvin Gaye's music. And it looks like him, so that's important. Because we've seen some stamps like that doesn't look like so. But I really enjoy doing stamps, regardless, because it's like a piece of history. It's a historical document that has a government seal on it per se. So I think it's really cool.
How large are the original canvases?
They're not very large. They're smaller than the size of this book.
Okay.
They have to be very small, relatively small, because if you make them too large, when it shrinks down, you'll lose a lot of detail. So they want to they have a limit as to how big you can make the original art.
Thank you.
This young man right up here.
How long did it take to write a book?
So you had the crossover? So that book took 5 years to write. I spent about 4 or 5 hours a day writing it. And why are you laughing?
He's like, whoa.
That's half my life.
Over the hill, I'll be 15 by that time. Like, slow down.
So, yeah. This book right here, it took. So I wrote this probably, I think I was in the car at Banana Republic, and I wrote it.
Oh.
And that was in 2008. And it took me 9 years to get it right.
Yeah. Right here.
2 questions. One is for both of you. What was your most significant failure, and how did you rebound? And then secondary to that, or primary, is how do you balance your life? 2 really tiny questions.
Thank you, and have a good night.
Failures are always the hardest thing to ask because you're thinking to yourself, they're just not failures, they're just case studies. So was there anything that you wrote, for example, as a book proposal that didn't sell? Or maybe an illustration that you did that you looked at and you said that really just is not going to work no matter what you approached it?
Or a moment in your life in which you needed to rebound.
I'll start. I'll say that one failure was I was in college and I was asked to do a series of illustrations for a textbook, and they were paying me, well, for a college student, they were paying me very well. And I got maybe I did 2 illustrations, and it didn't go over well. They didn't go over well, so I was basically fired from the job, and that really hurt my ego. But the lesson was that I'm going to be up against. I'm going to fail. It's possible that I can fail, but I have to develop a tough skin and realize that what I do is not going to be for everybody. Not everybody's going to like it, and you're going to hear about it. But as long as I'm doing my best work, as long as I love what I'm doing, I think that's the most important thing. And if I really like something then someone else is going to as well. So that was a really great life lesson for me. And it happened early, so that was good.
Didn't condemn you to life. What about you?
I wrote this book called Rebound, which is the prequel to the crossover. It's about the dad in the crossover when he's 12. And so it's set during this time that was my favorite era. It's set during the 80s. And I love the 80s. I was in junior high and high school, and I was trying to be cool. Like, that was my time. The music, the members only jackets, right? And so when I wrote Rebound, I had a reference in there where one of the main characters' neighbors is watching she takes naps during the day so she can stay up late and watch Arsenio Hall. Well, Arsenio Hall wasn't on there. It didn't come on until 91.
Yeah.
And then every one of my books, in 96, I spent 3 days with Tupac in Charleston, South Carolina. And so it was a really sort of powerful weekend on so many levels, destructive and progressive, like just conflicting. And every one of my books, my novels, I mentioned Tupac, like in some capacity. And I mentioned him in Rebound. He didn't have a song out. He wasn't even out yet.
Yeah.
And so I didn't discover this until the book was at the printer. And they had printed like 80,000 copies. And so I won the Newbery Medal, and so I sort of made a demand. Y'all need to like shred every book. And they were like, no. And I called the CEO, like I had a long talk with her. I was like, this is unacceptable, you need to shred it. And this is my reputation, this is my 27th book.
Right.
It's shoddy work if you're gonna put this stuff. And so it just went back and forth, and they finally were like, no, we aren't gonna do it. And my wife was like, you're just gonna have to accept it. And they reprinted it. And so it was a huge failure for me. And I ended up making this video, talking about social media. I ended up making this 3-minute video. Don't go look at it, y'all. Still painful. I was in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I remember making the video, and because the tour was starting in 2 weeks, and I remember just telling everybody, this is what I did. This is what happened. I caught it, but it's too late, and I made this mistake. And I was in pain. I was crying. It was just work. It was hard. And I remember the hundreds of responses I got on social media were thank you. Thank you for showing our kids what it's like to own up to your mistakes. And it was just a hard thing that I learned a lot from.
But the one thing that occurs when you have low points is that you have high points. And you have actually created, look at my segue, you created a new imprint, Versify, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so y'all can clap.
Yeah.
I used to own a publishing company from 95 to 2005, and I wasn't I even published one of their writers who y'all may know. He lives here. I just saw him today. His name was Michael Datcher.
Yeah. What's Cowboy?
Yeah. So I published a lot of writers, but I wasn't making any money. And so we ended up closing it down, and I always said if I ever had the opportunity, I would publish other writers. And so fast forward 2016, and Houghton Mifflin asked me if I wanted to publish other writers, and I was like, yes. And so we started an imprint called Versify. Undefeated by Kadir and I is one of the first books on that list. Last Day of Summer by Lamar Giles, who's here, is a middle grade fantasy. White Rose by Kit Wilson. Vamos, Let's Go to Market by Raoul III. And so the idea is to now give other writers an opportunity to find their voice and to lift it. So yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. We have one last question. Oh no, I'm sorry. 2 questions right here. One right here, and then we'll get to 2.
Kwame, what made you decide to focus on children's books?
Right.
And are you working primarily with other authors who are focused on
So I had written essentially, like I told you, love poems. So the first 12 books I self-published, and it was for adults. And then my second daughter was born. And I started reading to her a lot of children's books. And my sensibilities began to change. And so I began to write for children just out of necessity. My wife was like, write her a prayer. And and so I just began to be in that zone and writing for kids. In terms of the books that we're publishing and the other writers we're nurturing, it's primarily children's books. But I also put in my contract that if I discovered some adult writers, that I would want to publish those as well. And I think we found a book that may fit that mold and sort of help launch that part of the business.
Okay, beautiful. We have time for 2 more questions. I'm gonna go right here. Yeah. I see it. Don't worry. I'm saving it for last. Don't worry for last. I got
It's been a
you.
long time.
Yep.
I'm interested in your process.
Right.
I'm a writer, and I remember telling my mother I wanted to be a writer, and she was like, "What?" Did you have to? How did your parents feel about what you wanted to do, and what is your process, your daily process of writing? And how many hours do you spend on your craft?
Right.
For both of you all.
Yeah. So my parents were writers. But they didn't write poetry, and so when I told my dad I was going to write poetry, he just sort of laughed. And then when I told him I wanted to publish poetry, and my dad owned a publishing company, and I said, "Can we publish poetry under your company?" And he was like, "No." He's like, "You ain't gonna make any money."
That's hardcore.
And then he ended up. And he gave me a check for $1,700 while telling me no. And he tells me to this day, I wanted to see if you were really serious. But so my dad and my mom, they immersed me in literature and poetry, but they weren't poets. And what was the second part of your question?
How much time do you put into your craft daily?
When I'm writing, I write 4 or 5 hours a day.
Yeah. And how often do you draw? I mean, what's your in terms of your schedule? Like, do you have a schedule, like a morning, evening, or all day, or?
I don't have a routine. It's kind of all over the place. Whenever I can work. I mean, if I'm working on a book, I'm certainly painting every day. Right. If I'm writing or researching, I'm writing and researching every day.
Right.
But there's no limit to. I mean, it would be great. I know Walter Dean Myers, he wrote from, like 2 o'clock in the morning to 6, something like that.
Right.
He had the rest of the day to do whatever he wanted to do.
Yeah.
That's awesome, but I can't do that.
Yeah.
So I just, it's great to, if I can do something every day.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing is to go to bed and feel like you didn't do anything the whole day.
Right. Beautiful. Last question is from this young woman right here.
How many books did you illustrate?
I have illustrated over 30 books.
Oh, beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. All right. There you go. Yeah, I was like that. So what we're gonna do to end this, we would like Kwame to read from the Undefeated. Take it away.
Am I looking at them or the camera?
You could. This is your show. You can go wherever you want. We'll edit around you.
I'm good. If you have the book, please turn to page 1 in your text. This is for the unforgettable, the swift and sweet ones who hurdled history and opened a world of possible. The ones who survived America by any means necessary. And the ones who didn't. Do you know why this page is blank? Why? She said because the other people didn't survive. This is for the undeniable, the ones who scored with chains on one hand and faith in the other. This is for the unflappable, the sophisticated ones who box adversity and tackle vision, who shine their light for the world to see and don't stop till the break of dawn. This is for the unafraid, the audacious ones who carried the red, white, and weary blues on the battlefield to save an imperfect union. The righteous marching ones who sang, "We shall not be moved," because Black lives matter. This is for the unspeakable. Do you know what that is?
Those?
Yeah.
No.
What do you think it is?
Like sculptures, maybe?
Sculptures. Sculptures. What do you think it is?
It might be the slaves on the boat because they were very crunched together.
Slaves on the boat because, so they weren't slaves, they were Africans who were made, right. This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unlimited, unstoppable ones, the dreamers and the doers who swim across the big sea of our imagination and show us the majestic shores of the promised land. The Wilma Rudolphs, the Muhammad Alis, the Althea Gibsons, the Jesse Owenses, the Jordans and the LeBrons, the Serenas and the Cheryls, the Reese Whitleys and the undiscovered. This is for the unbelievable, the we real cool ones. This is for the unbending, the black as the night is beautiful ones. This is for the underdogs and the uncertain, the unspoken but no longer untitled. This is for the undefeated. This is for the undefeated. This is for you and 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 you. This is for us.
And with that, I think we'll call it a night. Can we get a last round of applause for Kwame Alexander and Kadir Nelson?